This is what the average Joe thinks, but somehow in this day and age, that is a very bold thing to proclaim. And in the years past, it would have gotten you canceled or deplatformed, but I think people are just tired of dealing with this.
Many years ago, I had a friend who really got into anime. He went to Best Buy to frequently buy anime on VHS. One anime, however, he felt very embarrassed to purchase. So he would sandwich that tape between two other tapes, hoping that the clerk wouldn't comment on the middle tape. That middle tape was Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon was an anime that my friend would watch constantly. He was drawn to the feminine character designs and the charming antics of this magical girl anime. And it was a show that he knew if he admitted to watching around his peers, he'd be mocked. Even though the Sailor Moon S-Arc was pretty damn good, there was a fascination with the design that he couldn't shake, just drawing him towards more anime that challenged his perceptions of what men watch and how they engage with media. Sailor Moon was a big part of that anime fascination that, for a time, he found shameful. Fortunately, this show had no weird effect on me, but there was definitely an anime obsession bubbling in my teenage years. The medium was refreshing for how it broke the norms of how most Americans interpreted cartoons, sexuality, violence, and vulgarity. Anime just felt as if it were exploring the taboo with all its wonder and disgust, spanning from My Neighbor Totoro, which every age should watch, to Violence Jack, which nobody should watch. It's an allure of anime that still persists to this very day. The fascination and potential within anime, I believe, also connects to the prevalence of VTubers. Virtual YouTubers, or VTubers for short, are a unique phenomenon. It is a style of YouTuber that uses facial tracking technology and design to produce an avatar that interacts in real time with their movements and voice. This favoring of a digital character presentation maintains a certain level of anonymity while also allowing one to better express oneself. Just as we adopted the stylized characters for online games, VTubers can control how they want to be seen when discussing topics in videos. They can choose to be someone more beautiful if they feel ugly, or as the opposite gender if they are considering or engaging in a transition, or even if they're just curious. Or they may even adopt the avatar of another animal or creature if they really want to escape into fantasy. There is a lot of freedom for VTubers to control a vessel to express themselves. But it's mostly anime characters. Like, there are a few exceptions, but it's mostly YouTubers looking like anime characters, which I will admit is a tad reductive when trying to explain VTubers. One of the bigger VTubers is Rev Says Desu. Don't let Rev's big-eyed anime girl avatar fool you. He is using this anime girl to talk about, as he lists in his profile, gaming news, drama, VTubers, anime, bad social media takes, and much more. That's a lot of ground to cover, and I doubt that Rev has much background, insight, or cultural curiosity to say anything much of value about the much more part of his coverage. Now, I may not be as fully engrossed in the online drama and gaming news sphere, but I do enjoy movies and TV shows, so let's see what this prolific VTuber has to say on those subjects. In responding to Rev Says Desu, I will meet him on the same level by adopting the avatar of various anime women. Not anime girls, anime women, because I want to be seen as the adult in the room.
So Titter and me once again talking about the Superman movie, since it's going to release this week. Now, this is a movie with a very iconic IP, one that's going to have a lot of hype surrounding its release, and one that's probably going to make a lot of money at the box office. However, that might be limited thanks to a last-minute media campaign, I guess you could call it, by director James Gunn, who has gone out of his way to make many controversial statements at the last second before this movie comes out, including some headlines we'll go over where he makes quotes basically saying this movie is going to be political, there's going to be political aspects to it, and these politics will represent real-life counterparts. And also, if people don't like that, well, they're jerks, and he basically wants them to go away. Yeah, not a great thing to do right before a movie like this is releasing.
Prior to the release of the Superman movie, James Gunn had worked on 3 DC Comics projects, those being the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, and Creature Commandos. And all 3 of these projects had clearly vocal politics. The Suicide Squad had a misfit ensemble fighting back against the imperialism of both the American government and Starro. Peacemaker featured the titular anti-hero standing up to his racist father and trying to shed his ignorant political perspectives from such an upbringing. And Creature Commandos was pretty much the same deal as the Suicide Squad, but with the added spice of G.I. Robot killing a lot of Nazis in the past and present. Maybe you didn't care for the politics of these superhero projects, or maybe you paid them no mind because they didn't involve A-listers. However, most people I know seem to like these movies and TV shows just fine. It's likely because the storylines that address political issues are not a deal breaker. If anything, the earnest nature of the politics made James Gunn's DC projects even more appealing because he wasn't going to soften superheroes to be palatable for both sides of the political aisle. And I know you're probably not a box office oracle, Rev Dev Redemption, but your speculation was off here. The movie had a domestic opening of $125 million, which is the highest opening box office for a solo Superman movie. So I don't think Gunn's words did much of any damage.
Like I said, iconic IP is the golden ticket of content. Any Superman movie is destined for at least a moderate level of success, if not major success. And if you look at the various trailers, including the first official trailer for Superman, very well received, despite some controversial creative decisions with this film that were already discovered by the time this came out. But like I said, very well received. And despite that, oddly enough, the box office projections are decent. You can see like 90 million to 125 million in the US. And that is something that is a number that I think they're going to achieve. Let me make this clear right from the jump. I think this movie is going to make a lot of money. The problem is you have to ask yourself, will they be able to overcome a ridiculously inflated budget, as we'll talk about later in this video? And also, how much is James Gunn and his comments at the last minute going to impact the potential reach of this movie at the box office?
It did not affect it. The movie made a lot of money considering it met the highest projected amount for its US opening. According to Variety, the film's profit was $125 million. The movie also beat the superhero competition at the box office in 2025, making far more money than Captain America 4 or Fantastic Four. Maybe Gunn's words affected your interest in Superman, but considering the movie did just fine, maybe Gunn doesn't need to appeal to people like you.
Now, right now, the box office is doing well. It's been a tough year for a lot of different franchises, but looking at Jurassic World Rebirth, it's done really, really well. Its opening weekend has gotten over 300 million. It's smashed all projections, and it's doing well. And it's a movie I saw. It was solid. Okay, out of the 4 Jurassic World movies, I think it was the worst one, but it was solid, right? It was a good time at the movie theater. I mean, it's a very simple formula, just like Superman. It's CGI dinosaurs. How could it be bad? Just put the CGI dinosaurs out there, dangle in front of people, and just sit back and collect the box office revenue. That's pretty much all there is to it.
I don't know, I've kind of lost my appetite for CGI dinosaurs. We've had 7 Jurassic Park movies, and Rebirth just felt like another stroll through this familiar park. I also want to highlight how reductive that Revlon is being here for saying that Superman is simple. All Superman has to do is fly around and punch people. That's all that people care about with Superman, right? They don't actually care about how the character is written or the challenges that he might face.
I don't read the words, I just like when he punches people.
Also, Superman has had very political storylines in the past and present that have reflected our world. So if anything, it's very refreshing that James Gunn isn't afraid to make a Superman movie that won't shy away from politics. So with Revolution X here saying that Superman is just a simple character, that's a very tourist take. You are really showing your ignorant VTuber ass here.
But looking around right now, that number they achieved, right, in the opening weekend, over 300 million, already puts them in the top 10 for the entire year of 2025. That's how bad things have been. In fact, that opening weekend number smashed Snow White out of the water. Their entire theatrical run was beaten by over 50% in this opening weekend of Jurassic World Rebirth. Also, you had the F1 movie. People are saying that's really good. I haven't checked it out myself, but that one is right around the same, with a longer run, of course.
Can you stay on topic? Look, I know dopes like these have to keep talking about Disney, but your video is supposed to be about Superman. I mean, we get it. Snow White sucks. It's a bad movie. It didn't make money. Move on.
Let's get right into what the big controversy is with Superman. So obviously, this is an iconic American superhero. It's a big part of his identity and everything to do with this franchise. And people were wondering from the jump, how is James Gunn going to treat anything involving that identity? And they've made it very clear. They're tiptoeing around it from day one. Okay? James Gunn, as well as David Corenswet, the actor behind Superman, they have avoided using phrases like the American way, which was already raising eyebrows about a couple weeks ago when this first came out. And apparently in a recent interview, he was talking about this character and saying, and the reality is that what he doesn't have to be is Superman, when he doesn't have to be this calm, reassuring presence to the public, when he doesn't have to symbolize safety and security and truth and justice and all those good things. He still feels those values, which a lot of this stuff already doesn't sound like the Superman people have been used to for decades now.
You sure about that, Reverend Desu? Because Superman has not always been about the American way. The motto of Superman, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, wasn't a saying from the comics, but from the 1940s Superman radio show during the height of World War II. And interestingly enough, after the war ended, a 1948 Superman film serial changed it to truth, tolerance, and justice. Now, yes, the American Way motto was revived for the 1950s TV series, but the 1960s TV cartoon changed it to truth, justice, and freedom. And then we got the 1970s live-action movie, which went back to the American Way motto, and the most recent change from the comics in the 2020s changed it to truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Given all these revisions over the years, the two most consistent things that Superman seems to stand for is truth and justice. So describing Superman as being about truth, justice, and all that stuff is a very fitting way to put it. Now, Superman has defended America, but also has been highly critical of the American government in more than one comic, TV show, and movie. Sure, Superman does represent the American experience of being an immigrant, an illegal immigrant, mind you, but that's an experience that doesn't always represent the brightest side of the USA. Being honest about the faults of our country is what makes comics like Superman Smashes the Klan such a great read. But if you only associate Superman with being an American superhero, you have a very limited view of the character.
It's no longer truth, justice, and the American way. It's now truth, justice, and good things. Whatever that means. It's actually a pretty loaded thing if you're saying, well, we're replacing the American way with good things. But yeah, this tiptoeing around the American identity of Superman was already raising some eyebrows. And then you have this, reported by Variety here. James Gunn says Superman is about an immigrant that came from other places and how we've lost the value of basic human kindness. Yes, it's about politics. Seems like a really good decision to do right before this movie is set to release. I mean, like literally in the last seconds, he is now making it clear this is about politics and it's trying to mirror some realities of modern politics in the modern landscape of our society. Yeah, that's probably not going to go over too well with a lot of people, or at least it's going to feel very divisive.
Divisive for whom, Reverly Hills 90210? Who is going to have a problem with James Gunn leaning into the politics of Superman being an immigrant, a key factor of his origins? This is all just making the film sound more appealing. In fact, there were many people who had no interest in superhero movies, they had kind of like checked out of them, but once they heard James Gunn's statements, they became interested in Superman.
I don't know if you've heard the rumors or you've seen the internet as of lately. They're getting quite excited about this new Superman movie. So excited that it actually made me a person who's completely burnt out on superhero movies. I'm checked out. I have been for a while. That I'm signed out, but a lot of people are signed in and tapped in. And Superman is super cool, and you want to watch it. But I was like, okay, I'll wait till it's out in theaters. Until I heard the rumor that apparently the new Superman film is really anti-colonialism. anti-Zionism. And it's not subtle about it either. And like I saw things where people are like, they kill Benjamin Netanyahu in the film. I'm like, what? That can't be true. I saw other people posting, yeah, the majority of the film is literally Superman flying around screaming, the Nakba never ended. And then he says, fuck Israel. That's what the movie's about. I was like, that's not, you know what? Why is the internet really, what's going on here? What's this all about? For some reason, all of you are actually making me interested in watching this movie. I'm just curious.
And it apparently appealed to many people, considering it was the top-performing superhero movie of 2025. So your aim is really off here, Revenge of the Desu.
And we're talking about this immigrant kind of angle here. We'll see some of the comments here. So he said this, the story of America, and at a basic level, is about a man searching for a better life away from his original home. I mean, Superman is the story of America, an immigrant that came from other places and populated the country. But for me, it's mostly a story that says basic human kindness is a value and something we have lost. Now, I've seen this phrase, basic human kindness, used a lot by some of the most insufferable and, quite frankly, deranged people on the internet. So I'm a little hesitant with this phrase being used so flippantly.
Be suspicious of those who talk about basic human kindness, argues a constantly online VTuber. But also, I don't think James was being flippant when talking about kindness, because if you watch the movie, that aspect of his character is highly present. And I know it's easy to argue against someone like this in hindsight after watching Superman, but the levels of inaccuracies in his assertions are so high that it's damaging his credibility. Because if he really doesn't know that much about Superman, or enough to make accurate movie predictions, why would anybody listen to him on this subject?
He's trying to make it an immigrant story, as we'll see, kind of reflecting upon current tensions in the United States. And we look at Superman as a character, an alien that's shot down as an infant, as a baby, and then raised by farmers out in rural America, and then being integrated into American society and then doing good deeds for America. And now we're trying to basically reflect that on current things going on. You can see where people are getting a little bit tired of the comparison, kind of rolling their eyes at it.
Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I'm kind of tired of people complaining about shit like this. Hearing someone bristle about Superman addressing our current world, something he's done in the comics many times over, just makes my eyes roll. In fact, here, let me just do that now. Oh no, they're stuck. What do I do? They're stuck. But also, why do you have a problem with Superman interacting with the modern world? Do you want him to be stuck in the 1940s? Because he is a superhero who has shifted with the times. The Superman who appears in the 1978 Superman movie is not the same Superman who appears in the 1950s TV show. The hero is interacting with a different world with different concerns, politics, and technology. So, what's your preference? Should Superman just be a mindless superhero movie that only interacts with a fictionalized world that has no reflection of our own? Because that sounds like a really boring and cowardly way to make a Superman story.
But continuing on, Gunn acknowledged that the movie's themes may be interpreted differently across political groups, especially considering the current nationwide unrest around immigration. However, Gunn stands by the ideals embedded in Superman and added that he doesn't care if anyone takes offense. Continuing, yes, it plays differently, but it's about human kindness, and obviously there will be jerks out there who are just not kind and will take it as offensive just because it's about kindness. But screw them.
Yeah, I'm with James Gunn on this point. Screw the whiny YouTubers who bitch and moan about when movies use the P word. My apologies though, Reviction Notice, you were still reading.
He continued, yes, it's about politics, but on another level, it's about morality. Do you never kill no matter what, which is what Superman believes, or do you have some balance as Lois believes? Oh, this sounds like such a great centerpiece of this movie.
And it was a great scene.
He's making it very clear. This is about politics. It's going to be a political movie. And on top of that, if you don't like it, if this offends you or bothers you in any sort of a way, you're a jerk, and he's saying screw you. Again, right before the movie's coming out. This is a cash grab, and he's doing everything in his power to wane that in ways that are just not necessary. He would have been better off just letting this come out into theaters and present itself for what it is. But he's getting ahead here and getting on a moral high horse and talking about all these things about human kindness and how this is going to make basically the jerks angry.
I'm not angry, cried the anti-woke YouTubers who bitched about this movie. Please don't post about how I got angry.
There's another angle here where he's been getting very defensive about the projections of this movie in the box office and what expectations have been made for this movie to break even, where he says it's nonsense to think Superman will flop, and if it doesn't make 700 million, it doesn't need to be as big as people are saying. So there's some numbers people are throwing out there for it to break even, and he's not too happy about it. And we can see right here, it's set to launch this week, and he's saying, is there something riding on the question? And he says, yeah, but it's not as big as people make it out to be. They hear these numbers that the movie is only going to be successful and make 700 million or something like that, and it's just complete and utter nonsense. It doesn't need to be as big of a situation as people are saying. Well, I don't know. If this movie doesn't make 700 million, I think that's a really bad sign because the budget for this film is estimated to be astronomical. Like one of the biggest budgets for a superhero movie we have ever seen.
The production budget for Superman was pretty high at $225 million, but it's not one of the biggest budgets for a superhero movie. It's still way behind Avengers Endgame, which had a $400 million production budget. But also, James Gunn wasn't wrong. The movie did not grow $700 million at the box office, yet it still turned a profit.
In fact, there are some reports that the gross budget of this film was nearly $400 million. And this was a figure submitted in order to secure tax incentives, which will get down that cost by, it's projected, about $100 million. But still, right off the bat with a gross budget of nearly $400 million, and people in the industry are predicting that the marketing for this might be over $200 million. And some estimates are getting as high as $700 million to break even.
And considering the movie made a profit, they were wrong about the film not breaking even. The same way that you were wrong about how James Gunn's words would harm the appeal.
Now, there was another twist in the PR campaign here. Yeah, wubba lubba dub dub. We got Rick and Morty, guys. So James Gunn and Zack Snyder, who many people try to pit against each other, and their fandoms are pitted against each other, they played themselves on the latest episode of Rick and Morty. And they're being pretty silly about many different things. And basically the plots of this episode was that Rick was angry, and Rick and Morty as well were angry about a franchise that James Gunn was working on. And Rick and Morty go out there and make something that ends up, in James Gunn's eyes, being better than what he created. And this was his reaction. This is the only thing I want to play. Otherwise, I'm risking probably copyright anyways. But this line is just... oof.
They outgunned the gun.
They outgunned the gun. Now, I think his voice acting skills are actually pretty decent, by the way. I will point that out. I will give that to James Gunn. But yeah, that is the Rick and Morty action here, the Rick and Morty connection, where James Gunn says dream job, playing a villain on hashtag Rick and Morty. I don't know if this is really like something you should be saying, like the dream job was to play a villain on Rick and Morty when your Superman film is coming out this week. I think that dream job should have been Superman. Like, the priorities seem a little messed up here, but...
James Gunn is having fun playing a character on a cartoon, and you really tried to spin that as being bad press for Superman. You didn't even make a compelling case. You just looked at social media posts about his appearance and used them as evidence that Gunn is endangering the appeal of his Superman movie. By what? Not talking about Superman when addressing Rick and Morty? Hasn't he been talking enough about Superman in various interviews? I gotta tell you, Revrelay, you're not selling me on this being bad PR.
Anyways, there's just a lot going on with this film. And like I said earlier, and I'll say it a million times, I believe this film is going to sell a lot at the box office. I think it's going to do really well as a gross number. But the issue is, will it overcome this massively bloated budget? They've been trying, James Gunn included, to reduce the perception of what the budget is, but they can't really get over that for too long. Eventually, you're going to know whether or not this was a financial success for DC. And at this point, they have to overcome the massive budget as well as these last-minute comments by James Gunn that is just making things more controversial, but not in a way that's bringing any sort of renewed interest in this film as it's releasing. I just think it's causing more division.
It sure doesn't seem like James Gunn's comments drove people away, so I think you're wrong about this. You might want to stick to covering anime and YouTube drama exclusively.
I don't think this is going to destroy the movie. Like, it's not going to bomb now because of the things he's been saying, but why not capitalize on this as much as you can? Why would you come out and say these controversial things right at the last second and start creating a narrative that this film is political, it's divisive, and people are going to get mad about it? If they do, they're jerks, and that the director is saying screw you to those people? How is that productive in any sort of a way? I just don't know. It seems to happen with a lot of films these days.
If you don't think the movie is going to bomb, why shouldn't James Gunn just come out and say these earnest comments about the movie he made? What reason does he have to shut up about the movie's politics? Will it harm the audience appeal? Not really, as I've already proven. Will it prevent anti-woke dorks like you from seeing the movie? Well, no, your lot still needs some superhero media to bitch about, so you'll see it anyway. Will it hurt the feelings of the anti-woke? Probably, but who gives a fuck? Y'all are annoying and should stop being pandered to.
That's going to do it for this video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.
Say, did you notice how controlled and almost passive Revoltron came off in this video? He mostly just reads articles and social media posts without much reaction. He's not fuming with performative anger, but he also doesn't seem to have much interest in the topic of Superman. If you don't want to talk about Superman, you don't have to. In fact, I'd prefer it if you didn't, if you don't have much to say and just toss out some tourist takes. But you know, I'll admit, I have a bias when talking about this movie. I love Superman as a character, I read his comics fairly regularly, and I love James Gunn's Superman movie. So let's switch gears and see how Ravioli and Meatballs discusses Joker Folie à Deux, a movie I did not like. Who knows, maybe he dislikes the movie for the same reasons I do.
The reviews are in, and people are very disappointed. Not only is this film a disappointment at the box office, but viewers of the film are walking out of theaters, giving very bad reviews. Overall, a very big disappointment, and a lot of people have a very simple question. Why was this movie even made? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's a cash grab. And I believe in the very, very controversial opinion that maybe we should have some more standalone films, right? Just one successful film, no unnecessary sequels. However, a lot of times when you have a successful first film, sequels are made as a simple cash grab, and they often work to not only damage the reputation of the franchise as a whole, but sometimes it damages the original story as well, and that's what happened with Joker 2. In fact, a lot of people believe that this film was basically made out of spite for the fans of the first film. They genuinely believe that this was made to be a big middle finger to the fans of the original Joker film from 2019.
I mean, the first Joker movie was kind of made out of spite as well. Director Todd Phillips didn't shy away from complaining about how he can't make raunchy comedies anymore. He bitched about woke culture and realized that audiences mostly want comic book movies. So he pitched a subversive DC Comics movie to Warner Brothers. And when you watch the movie he made, there's clearly a chip on his shoulder about comedy. The big monologue by Arthur Fleck on the TV show feels more like Phillips ranting than Arthur's. For as much as I don't like the Joker sequel, it does seem on brand not to settle for audience expectations. After all, the first Joker movie was revered by so many because it was radically different from other comic book movies. So you might as well deliver something even more subversive if Warner Brothers gives you the budget to make the movie that you want. And spitting at the fans who misinterpreted Joker as aspirational seems like a provocative move. I don't think Phillips executed it well, but hey, I admire the swing.
Now let's go back to that film, the original Joker, 2019. This was a film that a lot of people did not expect to succeed. it was kind of doomed in many different ways. It was being directed by Todd Phillips, who is most known for doing the Hangover trilogy. Also, it was a background story of the Joker, and a lot of people were just like, who even asked for this? But we know the story. It came out, and it was a huge success. A lot of people fell in love with the story. They fell in love with the character, or at least sympathized with the character Arthur Fleck. It ended up being a enormous box office success, getting over $1 billion, becoming the first R-rated film to do so. And also, it was extremely well reviewed by the audience scores. And of course, there was some mishap in the media. A lot of people were making ridiculous claims about this film in the months leading up until its release. There was a general narrative out there where people were trying to say that this film, the original Joker, was going to inspire an incel uprising where people, these incels, would go to the movie theater and they'd be inspired by this story and go out and, how do I say this on YouTube, commits mass Minecrafting of people.
Mass Minecrafting? What's with this baby language? The concern was about a repeat of the mass shooting that happened during a theatrical screening of The Dark Knight Rises. I know your VTuber avatar is meant to look like a young girl, but you don't have to speak like one, considering you don't even try with the voice. But also, this isn't a conspiracy without merit. There were credible threats of a potential mass shooting based on intelligence from the FBI. Sure, there weren't any mass shootings with Joker, but given the Aurora shooting during The Dark Knight Rises, the subject of the Joker movie, and the frequency of gun violence in America, that's not something to take lightly.
There were no massacres as a result of this film. In fact, the only thing that looked like a massacre coming out of this film is Joker 2, Folie. Now, we should have known better with a title like that. You knew this was going to be a bunch of pretentious slop.
Ah, yes, because anything with a French title is pretentious. That's why nobody enjoyed Hot Shots Part 2. Drop the French, you snobs. It's two, not deux. But also, Folie à deux refers to a psychiatric term for two people sharing the same delusions. The term translates to madness of two, and I don't know, I think Folie à deux sounds better. This sequel title doesn't make the movie sound pretentious, considering how it directly describes the relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn. But yeah, sure, French bad. Maybe if it were in Japanese, it'd be less pretentious.
And the big change between the first film and this one was that this was going to be a pseudo-musical, where basically they're going to interweave a bunch of musical performances throughout the film, which is a very odd choice for this film based on what happened in the original one.
Is it that odd a choice? You do know that there were several sequences in the first Joker movie where Arthur was dancing to music, right? Sure, Arthur never sings along, but surely he would in his fantasies. I really didn't like Folie à deux, but considering the film's 3 notes of random genre musical numbers, repetitive courtroom drama, and meandering prison drama, the musical segments were the most entertaining. It might have been the best choice in a movie that was loaded with bad choices.
But that is something that was a big departure. And I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to talk very generally. But in the film itself, some people really consider the musical performances to not only be the filler, the fluff holding together the terrible story, that it was actually like propping up the story entirely, which is insane. Because in Joker 2, the storyline is so boring and just a regurgitation of most of the events of the first film. It's genuinely boring. So some people actually thought the musical numbers were more interesting than the story, which is an insane thing to say about a Joker film.
Seemingly insane, but hey, life is crazy that way sometimes. I will agree with Revillage of the Desu Damned here, though. The movie is incredibly boring.
It picks up where the last film left off. Arthur Fleck goes on trial for the crimes of the Joker, and it becomes a sort of how responsible is he for all of these actions and these murders and terrible things. And basically, to skip forward to the end, the ending is just atrocious. It's the worst thing ever. It basically makes the entire first film completely meaningless, and it takes away all of the mystery surrounding that film, the ambiguities. It takes away really the hearts of that entire movie. And it really not only this story in Joker 2 didn't just destroy Joker 2, it destroyed the first film too, which is amazing. A two stones with one bird kind of situation. A whole bunch of goofery right there.
The saying is two birds with one stone, which is what you meant to say. You know how Todd Phillips ruined two movies with one directing project. The way you phrased it makes it sound as though two movies destroyed one.
But the funny thing is, in terms of performances, Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga both did well. Like, I don't think anyone's shocked about Phoenix, but Lady Gaga, she did what she's supposed to, right? She's supposed to go in there and sing some musical numbers. Her take on Harley Quinn is a much more different one than we've seen. She's not just some pet for Joker to play with. She's more of a crazy, fanatical person obsessed with the Joker, but that's a whole different route. But they really did what they could for these roles. This story was just so bad. Like, it doesn't matter how good the acting is when the story is that bad. You can't fix the issue when the bones of the story are the problem.
Okay, we're on the same page so far, Revoltes V. Let's see what you got next.
Reflecting on the end of this movie and how it dismantled the events of the first Joker film, it's no surprise that the director Todd Phillips says now he's done with the DC universe, basically saying, yep, I destroyed that and now I'm going to move on and, say no more on the subject. Well, there is a genuine theory out there, and a lot of people believe this, and I think there's some merit to it. There's something off about Joker 2. It feels like a deliberate middle finger to the fans of the first film. It's trying to undermine everything that it was building up.
The Revanishing doesn't read the Rolling Stone review by David Fear for making his case. Maybe he has a character limit, I don't know, but let's be better than him and highlight the passage that he clearly wanted to focus on. Say what you will about Joker Folie à Deux, it's a different, more tuneful beast than its predecessor. And you couldn't call what they're doing fan service given its general stance that elevating and emulating disturbed, antisocial individuals just because they've tapped into inchoate rage is a bad idea. In fact, this sequel is whatever the exact opposite of fan service is. During its rare moments of clarity, you'd swear this is actually an indictment of those who flocked to Joker in the first place. Laugh, and the whole world laughs with you. Flip the bird to those who loved your nihilism yippity-dee mojo the first time around, however, and you may find yourself standing alone against a mob. The closest thing it has to a message of any kind is, hey fanatics, go fuck yourselves. And I think this is the best and worst aspect of the movie. I do like how Phillips has turned his crosshairs towards the audience who saw Arthur as aspirational. It is a problem that is more common than you think in movies, where cautionary tales are viewed with the exact opposite effect. See the movies Taxi Driver and Fight Club as examples. And while I appreciate the more direct approach, Phillips doesn't exactly replace that denied fan service with a better film. This is reflected in David's closing paragraph. Who exactly is Joker Folie à Deux for? Completist little monsters, Warner Brothers Discovery board members, people who wish Singin' in the Rain had 33% more insane clown posses. Having originally struck a chord with viewers who were down to Psycho Clown with Phoenix's scarily intense interpretation, who felt they had a Travis Bickle for their generation and might have repeated the same mistakes those God's lonely men from back in the day did, this new Joker wants to wag its finger at them. But it's also so alienating that it's not likely to appeal to the crossover types who threw gold statues at the first one either. This is the sequel's real ha-ha-ha punchline. What do you get when you cross a discordant riff on a fan favorite with a failed prestige project? Twice as much doo-doo. I think Rev VHS should have read this article, but I doubt he would have much to say. He'd probably just get angry at the closing potty joke because it was written in the language of the pretentious.
It's basically like one of those scenarios where you weren't supposed to like the character, but people did anyways. People liked the character Arthur Fleck, and they even sympathized with him. And unfortunately, that wasn't the goal of Phillips. Apparently, you were supposed to hate Arthur Fleck, and he was very upset about it.
I don't think Phillips wants you to hate Arthur Fleck. That's a very childish conclusion. I'm pretty sure Phillips wanted to criticize the audience who became obsessed with Joker and took the wrong message from his story. Do you feel for Arthur's desperate state? Of course. Do you feel sympathy for him being abused by others and tossed aside by society? Absolutely. Do you feel empathy for his killing of a coworker who came to visit him and later shooting a talk show host host who made fun of him. Because if you do, that's a bit alarming. I don't like either film because they're poorly made, but I get what Todd Phillips is trying to say in them. And if Joker was trying to portray a cautionary tale, Joker Folie Deux is shaking the audience by the shoulders and screaming, "It's a cautionary tale, you stupid fuck."
He comes out with a couple $100 million joke where he's going to go own the chuds who liked Arthur Fleck by dismantling his character entirely in the second film.
The movie sucks, but hey, fuck the chuds. They deserve nothing.
We've seen scenarios like this before in media where there's characters you're not supposed to like, but fans end up liking them, and then the directors panic and then try to rewrite the character in the most ridiculous ways to make you look like a fool for liking them in the first place. We've seen it with The Man in the High Castle. We've seen it most recently with The Boys, like, "Oh, you stupid chuds, you're not supposed to like Homelander, he's stupid." And then they have to make him comedically embarrassing and ridiculous in the latest season to make you feel stupid for liking him or even enjoying the character in any sort of a way.
Oh boy, this again. Okay, Homelander from The Boys was not portrayed as likable in the first season and was then rewritten to own the chuds who liked him. A key event that keeps coming up in The Boys that makes Homelander an antagonist is the airliner incident from season 1, episode 4. When trying to save a hijacked passenger plane with Queen Maeve, Homelander stupidly uses his heat vision on the terrorists and damages the flight controls. With no way to safely land the plane or save the passengers in time, Homelander advises Maeve that they not save anybody because the incident will make them look bad. And despite the plea of Queen Maeve to save a few people, Homelander just lets everybody die on the flight. After the airliner crashes, Homelander vows to find those responsible and punish them in a speech that replicates George Bush's words following 9/11. If you watched Homelander let people die to protect his image and thought that made him a cool anti-hero, then, well, I don't want to call you stupid, but let's just say I think you should read more. Also, I disagree that you can't enjoy Homelander in any sort of way. As a fascist egotist with superpowers and mommy and daddy issues, he is an entertaining antagonist. Homelander wields his powers in a highly reflective way, revealing how pathetic egomaniacs can be. But also, what do you mean by the latest season, in this video's case being season 4, that it was meant to make you feel stupid for liking Homelander? You didn't feel stupid before for liking that Homelander hooks up with a superpowered neo-Nazi in season 2, or when Homelander declares himself a savior that should be allowed to commit genocide in season 3. What I think is the most fascinating aspect of how right-wing dorks react to The Boys is how much amnesia they have about this show. Because I remember how on the nose the satire was for season 2, and then whiny dorks said that it ruined the show. And then they said the same thing for season 3. And season 4, and they'll likely say the same thing for season 5. Homelander was never meant to be likable from the start, and if you thought he was, maybe you should look deep within yourself and ask why. Ravel Vita just kind of repeats himself by looking at Rotten Tomatoes scores and then praising the Penguin as a better DC Comics project. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the end here to get his final thoughts.
To put a nail in the Joker 2, this was a monumental flop, and again, another example of a cash grab sequel that went beyond just disappointment. It literally tarnished the first film that so many people, like myself, enjoyed. A story that did what it had to do, made a very compelling story, and left just enough ambiguity at the end where it made it interesting and it had a little bit of mystery to it. But all of those gaps have now been filled in the worst way possible, and all the things you liked about the first film have been completely dismantled. Like, I cannot believe this actually happened, but it shouldn't have been too surprising knowing this was a sequel and likely a cash grab. But beyond that, it seemed like a personal vendetta from its own director against the fans of his own original work.
No!
Cash grab!
You know, I didn't like Joker Part 2, but I have to admit, there's something impressive about how mad this movie can make losers like this. Todd Phillips convinced an entire group of dorks to not only hate his Joker sequel for not giving them the Joker that they wanted, but also made them retroactively despise the previous film. But Rev Funny Suffix didn't really add much to this conversation. It's just boo-hoo, Joker pissed off fans by not validating their aspirational nihilism. So with superhero movies out of the way, let's see how badly he covers a topic topic like Sonic 3 not being nominated for Academy Awards because of DEI.
So today we're going to be talking about more examples of DEI causing issues, and this conversation is oddly going to start off with Sonic 3, which is currently in theaters and crushing it at the box office, which is not too surprising given the success of the previous two films. But this headline right here and some of the implications, if true, are insane. So it says, the Academy says that Sonic 3 is ineligible to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Now, let's establish this very quickly. Who cares what anyone at the Academy thinks, right? The Oscars and the other bi-monthly celebrations in Hollywood like that, the award shows, it's just an excuse for Hollywood elite to get together for a big circle jerk where they pat each other on the backs for being pretentious and completely out of touch.
Okay, fine. The Oscars suck and they don't matter. Then I guess Sonic not being nominated doesn't concern you and we can move on.
This headline implies, and based on what we're going to see, implies the possibility that Sonic 3 didn't make this cut because of DI-related concerns. In this case, apparently Sonic 3 not meeting certain requirements that are necessary to be on this eligibility list.
Okay, so you do care about the Oscars? I mean, I assume you do if you're still reading into this story.
So let's see this article that's being cited here. So it says more than a third of Oscar qualifying films this year are not eligible for Best Picture. There are 323 feature films eligible for the upcoming Academy Awards, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announced on Monday, though a whopping 36% of those 116 feature films are not eligible for consideration in the Best Picture category. Now, that public list from the Academy is viewable, and you see right here, no Sonic 3 whatsoever. And a lot of people are immediately coming to the defense of the Academy saying, oh, wait a second, Sonic 3, it came out pretty recently, so it probably just didn't qualify by some sort of a temporal technicality, right? That's not true. They've had plenty of time. We'll see that directly in a second, but there is a lot of strange things going on, including Mufasa, The Lion King, making the cut. They are on the list, and they released at the same time as Sonic 3. So any sort of concern about when Sonic 3 was released has nothing to do with this process. Now, just for a second, I'm going to go on a little tangent about Mufasa, The Lion King here.
Okay, while Rivera Drake here goes on a tangent about Mufasa and box office numbers, let's actually address the eligibility issue. If you go to the Academy Award website and read the representation requirements for Best Picture eligibility, you'll notice that the movies only have to meet 2 of the 4 standards. The first standard is on-screen representation, themes, and narratives of underrepresented ethnic groups. This is an easy one to cross considering one of the passing parameters is having at least one non-white supporting actor, which Sonic 3 has. The second standard is creative leadership and project team representation. This is kind of the same deal as the last one, but for those behind the camera. You need either 2 underrepresented individuals in any department leadership role, 6 crew members who fit the description, or a film crew that is 30% underrepresented, which can include women, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and people with disabilities. I took a look at the full credits for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and it does meet this standard. The third standard is industry access and opportunities, which basically means the film offers apprenticeships, internships, or training for underrepresented groups. And finally, the fourth standard involves audience development, which is pretty much representation in marketing and distribution. Considering you only need to meet 2 of these 4 standards, these are easy hurdles for a big studio that employs hundreds of people for their mainstream movies, hence why Mufasa was eligible. Keep in mind, not qualifying for Best Picture does not mean disqualification from receiving other Academy Awards. Sonic 3 was still eligible for categories such as Best Visual Effects and Best Sound Editing. It's highly likely that Paramount didn't even bother submitting Sonic the Hedgehog 3 for Best Picture since it was, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Consider this section of that article from The Wrap. The discrepancy between films that have qualified for the top category and films that are eligible in other categories comes either because the filmmakers did not attempt to qualify, likely the case for several documentary, animated, or international films, or because of new eligibility rules that require Best Picture candidates to meet additional benchmarks for diversity and inclusion. Because, did you actually look at this list? I mean, there are plenty of movies that could have met these requirements, but they likely didn't submit because they knew they wouldn't be nominated for Best Picture, let alone win. There are a lot of documentaries listed as ineligible, likely because documentaries never make it into the Best Picture category. Joker, Folie, Deux was eligible with an abundance of white people in front of and behind the camera, and the film was likely submitted because the previous Joker movie was nominated for Best Picture. And the Sonic movies have never been nominated for an Academy Award, even before these requirements for Best Picture eligibility. So, what's Revolutionary Girl Desu counter about why Sonic 3 was unfairly pushed out of the Best Picture eligibility? Well, his answer was vibes.
By all these measures, Sonic 3 is qualified, but it appears there's one of these two reasons. Either the team over at Sonic 3 did not apply, which I find very hard to believe. If you achieved some sort of potential milestone, it's also a good advertising, another thing they can add, that they qualified.
To advertise? Oh yeah, that's something movies do. They love to advertise and boast about how much they qualified for eligibility for Best Picture nominations. Yeah, that's something you definitely slap on the Blu-ray cover.
But there's this other part, obviously, that's the glaring one, and that is the raise standards. And looking at these standards, it's absolutely insane. So, in order to qualify properly, you have to submit a confidential Academy Inclusion Standards form and meet 2 out of the 4 of these standards that are required in order for the film to be deemed eligible for Best Picture consideration. And these standards are really weird. Like, the obsession with DEI and race is unbelievable. Just read some of these. Like, at least one of the lead actors or significant supporting actors submitted for Oscar consideration is from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group in a specific country or territory of production. This may include, and they list certain ethnicities that'll qualify as these underrepresented racial or ethnic groups that'll allow you to have the honor of being qualified for Best Picture. And you can scroll down. I mean, there's so many levels to this that you have to meet, and you have to get 2 out of these 4 to qualify.
A movie could star and be directed by straight white men, but if it has at least some underrepresented individuals working on the crew, in marketing, or interning, it would pass these standards, which, for big studios that rely on many departments and can facilitate internships, that's not hard, because Paramount had other movies that qualified, like Gladiator 2 and If, movies made by white guys and starring white guys. But hey, why let reading and critical thinking get in the way of demonizing DEI?
Based on what we've seen, this might be the reason that Sonic 3 did not qualify for Best Picture at the Oscars, which, if this is true, that is insane. Once again, DEI killing art and punishing people for just making a standard movie without forced diversity and inclusion. And speaking of Sonic 3, is Sonic 3 not inclusive? Because honestly, first of all, just looking at the cast, whether it's the actual actors who are live on the screen or the voice actors for characters like Knuckles, for example, we have plenty of diversity. Like, what are they talking about? There's plenty of women, there's black people, it's all over the place.
I agree, Lady and Rev. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 does have a diverse cast. But do you see how this hurts your argument? It really does sound like Sonic 3 just wasn't submitted. You're doing a poor job of arguing that DEI prevented Sonic 3 from getting an Oscar nomination. I mean, can you at least be entertaining if you're going to make shitty arguments?
And also, at the end of the day, like, the most crazy example is, like, Sonic. He's blue. Is that not diverse enough for you? Like, what is going on? There's various characters that are colors that are not even your traditional sense, right?
Wasn't a funny joke to begin with, but your delivery was awful, especially with how you pause for non-existent laughter.
But for some reason, people are now concerned that, yeah, they got snubbed for Best Picture nomination because of DEI-related concerns being pressed down by Hollywood. People are tired of this crap. We're seeing across the board the average person rejecting DEI, not wanting it to be a part of anything that they consume. And we're even seeing a lot of companies recently abandoning DEI. I even saw an article this morning about McDonald's abandoning some DEI-related policies at their company. Whether it's legitimate, like they're actually sincere about these things or not, it seems that there is a very clear vibe shift going on right now, especially after the election or the election results where Donald Trump will be the next U.S. president. I think there's been a big vibe shift, especially with DEI. People are absolutely fed up with this.
Say, remember when Target said it was rolling back its DEI efforts? Because they sure didn't seem happy about it, considering there was a massive boycott of the retailer that cost them billions of dollars. McDonald's faced the same issue with boycotts and protests against the company. And do you know how those companies responded? They tried to walk back and say, no, please, we'll bring back DEI, just please come back. And even though some people have forgiven these big companies for betraying their representation initiatives, many will never forgive them. Now granted, Revideodrome made this video before Trump's second term had even started, but again, he's really bad at reading the room.
But as always, Hollywood is its own place, right? It might as well be another country because they live on another plane of existence. They're completely out of touch. It's not surprising that these things are going to be held out longer than the average comparison points in the United States and across the world.
Yes, Hollywood is out of touch. Unlike Ace Ventura here, who thought people would be cool with companies abandoning DEI.
Now, there's one other thing I want to show about this whole Sonic 3 situation. Here's a clip from a few years back at the Oscars, and you have Jim Carrey, of course, who's a part of the franchise, and this was a little bit here that I find kind of ironic.
You know, I just finished a film. It's called Sonic the Hedgehog. Comes out in November.
Oh. Well, you know, come back next year. I'm sure it'll be nominated.
Yeah, so to understand that, that was from a few years ago, and that was before the original Sonic film had gone to theaters. And if you don't remember the drama going on at that time, it was insane because they had the original designs for Sonic come out. People hated it. They thought it was unappealing. And they actually listened. They took the time and the money to reshoot things, to improve the design, which obviously that worked out great. But at the time, it was getting crapped on by everyone, including people at the Oscars. Obviously, this is a bit, but still, to see things come full circle and how successful the franchise has been at the box office, and now, oddly enough, not being included for a Best Picture nomination, it's all pretty full circle.
Wait, why was this ironic or full circle? They weren't joking about the movie not making money or audiences hating it. The Sonic movie was joked about for not getting nominated for this awards show, and it didn't get nominated. The Sonic movies aren't even ineligible for awards. Paramount could run a for-your consideration campaign for Jim Carrey as Best Supporting Actor or the VFX team for Best Visual Effects if they really wanted to. So how is this the Oscars not admitting defeat? This insult to the Academy doesn't even make sense because the awards ceremony where Jim Carrey is asked to move is not the Oscars. That's the Golden Globes, you dopes. Okay, so far I've seen Ravicker of Dibley stumble hard when talking about comic book movies and the Academy Awards. Maybe cartoons are more of his speed, considering he likes anime. Maybe something like Dead End Paranormal Park. I rather enjoyed this cartoon. It was charming and spooky with a good balance of horror, comedy, and even romance. It also did a solid job of depicting the central characters of Norma and Barney, who are autistic and trans. I was kind of sad that it only lasted 2 seasons. I mean, I would have liked to have seen more. But let's see what Revan McAllister thinks of this cartoon.
You can see this show right here, Dead End Paranormal Park, created in 2022 with 20 episodes. And you can see the rating. It's for 7-year-olds, okay? And this is the main character, Barney Gutman. Barney is a 17-year-old gay trans Jewish boy with a huge crush on a coworker. He's a main character. The other is a bisexual girl who is autistic, in that Barney is voiced by Zach Barak, known for being the first openly trans actor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And there is a specific clip right here that's going around where this stuff is being advertised to children.
It's not the park. It's me. I'm trans, Norma. And everyone at school knows, and everyone at home knows. And being here, it's like a whole new place. I can just be Barney, and I can choose if and when I tell people. I've never been happier. And that's saying something when I spent today chased by terrifying zombie mascots. Pugsley reminded me how important it is to live your life without apology.
I thought this clip was rather sweet. The way Barney is open about the stress he feels with his identity and the comfort he feels in this park. And sure, it might be a little corny with him spelling out the message about not being ashamed, but it is for kids after all. And you sometimes have to make the moral lesson a little more clear for the younger crowd. So, what's his problem with this clip?
Again, if there's sort of woke themes and focuses on gender ideology and stuff like that in a show made for adults, the best response if you don't like it is to not watch it. But this is different.
It's not different. You don't have to watch it, and you can prevent your kids from watching it. If you don't want your kids watching a show like Paranormal Park, you can be the adult in the room and forbid them from watching it. And it's not like we're talking about SpongeBob or Peppa Pig, where it's a massive franchise that your kids feel they need to watch. It's a 2-season cartoon on a streaming service with literally hundreds of different and far more popular shows to watch. But please, Ravilla Wafers, give us your reasons for why this isn't just a show that you can't watch.
This content is being shown and promoted to children who are going to be confused. They are vulnerable. And this stuff is being shoved in their face. And a lot of parents don't even know that their kids are consuming stuff like this. There's no reason that a child should be thinking about any of these things. It's completely inappropriate. Anyone who disagrees with that's concerning.
Please think of the children, so saith Rev Drinks Dasani, a VTuber with an avatar looking like a young anime girl. I'm going to have to disagree with him on this one, though. There are kids and teenagers who are autistic, trans, gay, and bisexual. They exist, and demanding that a cartoon not feature characters with these traits is to deny that existence. You don't have to like this cartoon, and you don't have to watch it. But acting like children won't understand these topics, and that there's no place for cartoons like this, really showcases how limited your worldview is.
Okay, and I know a lot of people will watch this video or see a screenshot of my thumbnail on Twitter or something and call me a bigot. I'm not saying these themes should not be in media whatsoever. I'm saying keep it away from kids. Like, this is the normal person thing to say.
Oh yes, I've heard this saying before. You don't have a problem with TV shows and movies about gay and trans characters. You just don't want children to see it. Because children can apparently handle the decades of cartoons in which characters fall madly in love with the opposite sex, but once it's the same gender, that's apparently confusing. Yeah, that's a normal thought from a very normal person using an anime girl avatar. Yep, lots of very normal and not concerning stuff is going on with this YouTube channel.
This is what the average Joe thinks, but somehow, in this day and age, that is a very bold thing to proclaim. And in the years past, it would have gotten you canceled or deplatformed, but I think people are just tired of dealing with this.
Oh, please, how could anybody cancel such an adorable-looking, bigoted VTuber like you?
This is the creator of the show. This Hamish Steele. You can see their Bluesky account here. They in their bio, which totally not a self-insert in the show, by the way. Many such cases.
How dare an author represent an aspect of themselves in an original story that they wrote? You can't do that. When has any author ever made a good story by placing a piece of themselves in their work? But also, how do you know the characters were self-inserts of the author? You haven't watched the show. You watched one clip posted by Libs of TikTok, a shitty right-wing Twitter profile known for spreading bigotry bigotry and lies. You are out of your element here, Ravista Cruiser. You want to know how uninformed you are? You're complaining about a Netflix cartoon that was canceled 3 years ago. This cartoon isn't even being promoted anymore. And given that you never knew of this show when it was first streaming, it sure seems like it didn't have much of an impact to warrant such pearl clutching.
He wrote this in response to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He said, "Why the F are you even commenting on this, dickhead? Your sympathy for any of the families being slaughtered by your weapons, but a random Nazi gets shot and it's a public statement. You're such a effing evil piece of crap." So we're supposed to trust this guy to make shows for kids? This lunatic? I mean, instantly fired is the only way you should handle someone like this. There is no reason a person like this should be doing anything involving kids, especially for the purposes of entertaining kids.
He's not making shows right now. Paranormal Park was canceled. Also, if you're going to tone police, you might as well provide context here. Steele's comment was directed towards British Prime Minister Keir Starmer for his comment on mourning the death of Charlie Kirk. Starmer became massively unpopular for supporting Israel's genocide against Gaza. To be fair, he did change his stance, but it was way too late. The genocide only grew worse, and Starmer has only further tone policed on protests for Palestine. So Steele's anger is understandable to watch as a prime minister who initially supported Israel's slaughtering of thousands of people gets all emotional when a right-wing bigoted loudmouth bites the dust, which you would know if you provided context. But you don't. Because if you did, it might reveal that Steele's post was shared by Elon Musk, who then shared the clip of Paranormal Park posted by libs of TikTok, and then advocated for canceling Netflix because Musk has a personal vendetta against anything transgender. So all of this was because of Elon Musk. You did not just stumble across this cartoon on Netflix and found it appalling. You didn't look up Hamish Steele on social media and was shocked to discover his post about Charlie Kirk. You're just regurgitating posts made by Elon Musk, which you don't share in your video, probably because it's embarrassing to seek Elon Musk as a news source.
And this guy's clearly allowing his own agenda to leak into his work, and also he is clearly unhinged and celebrates political violence.
When somebody says they want you to shut the fuck up about Charlie Kirk, that's not a call for political violence. That seemed obvious given that Steele brought up the more concerning issue of genocide as a bad thing. This is such an awful video. I mean, what is he going to complain about next? Like, is Cocomelon going woke?
The entire premise of this Cocomelon episode, which I thought was like a random wholesome Chungus show, but I guess not. They have this gay couple with a cross-dressing toddler, and the entire message of the song that they're singing is about, just do what you like, just be you. And this is what happens. Again, you're telling this sort of narrative to young children who are very impressionable. This is weird. It's weird, man.
Holy shit, he's actually complaining about Cocomelon going woke. The rest of the video is just more of the same, just complaining about cartoons going woke by only looking at clips from right-wing Twitter accounts. So it's pretty clear he doesn't have a clue about cartoons either. Maybe we just need a movie more in line with the expertise of Rividalia Pickles. There was this Vice documentary on the manga industry, and he's got some passion for this topic. I mean, just look at him. So let's see what he has to say about it.
Quality material back there. I mean, the whole argument of no victims is something that nobody can deny. Because, of course, the next logical step for anybody offended by this stuff is to say, well, it leads people to be attracted to children and it encourages abuse. But unfortunately, as you'll see, not just in this clip, but throughout every part of this video, the people who claim there's a connection can't point to any sort of study or any sort of intrinsic link. It's always just how they feel or what they think based on their own experiences, but it's not something they can actually demonstrate through any sort of evidence.
Wait, he's actually going to do this, isn't he? This dude, who speaks through a suspiciously young anime girl avatar, and complain that people who want to include gay and trans characters in kids' cartoons are deranged, is going to argue that manga with sexualized children is fine.
That's the whole problem. I mean, on Twitter, for example, like the realm we're used to, a lot of the disgust and push to ban or outlaw this sort of material is based on personal objections. And as I always say on my channel, every single time we talk about this topic, whether it's lolicon, shotacon, or anything like that, your personal disgust is valid. It's perfectly fine to be disgusted by this sort of content, but your personal objections are not to be valued as the same as scientific evidence or studies. It's not the same. And acting on those personal objections really leads people into a corner where they're just defending themselves based on how they feel in a way they can't really articulate other than just screeching pedophile on Twitter or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why would anybody call you that when your defense of manga depicting sexualized minors is just, too bad, it's legal in Japan, show me studies. That's not a concerning response. That's a very normal thing to say from a very normal VTuber like Reviva Las Vegas.
Japanese lawmakers agree with artists like Shinji. In the US, just owning a magazine with animated child porn can get you up to 15 years in prison and label you a sex offender for life.
No. I mean, like, this is the part I really wanted to include, that last sentence. It didn't have much to do with his part, but I just wanted to include that. They literally just completely misrepresented US law. So if you've been on this channel long enough, I'm sure you're familiar with the federal codes that control this sort of thing.
Why would people who watch your channel regularly know this? What have you been talking about with them?
It's totally a completely unfair generalization of this whole topic. The fact that I could hop in my car right now, drive down to the local Barnes & Noble, and purchase manga off their shelf that contains lolicon blows this whole argument in its face.
How do you know you can do that? How do you know you can go to Barnes & Noble and buy manga that sexualizes minors? And if the answer is that you've done it before, why? Why did you do that? I could barely get through this video. I mean, it's mostly just revomatorium pointing out inaccuracies and how the documentary talks about pornography laws and how Vice is scummy for trying to demonize manga. My problem with this commentary is that he brushes aside the greater issues too flippantly. Instead of making a case for this artistic expression, he just plays lawyer ball, getting hung up on the legal technicalities more than the moral issue of this material. Revudu Desu will question Vice's agenda in this hit piece, but what about the people making the manga that sexualizes minors? What was their motivation for making this art? What is their art expressing? Why did they draw that manga the way that they did? Why do they sell this manga exclusively at conventions where there's an abundance of that same material? I don't think he's prepared to ask these questions the same way that he would of Western media, which he feels has gone too woke. Now, I know this revelation about Revachol Says Disco coming to the defense of manga sexualizing minors probably isn't shocking considering everything I've shown you. You saw his VTuber avatar, listened to his views, and likely want to tell me, Mr. Policeman, I gave you all the clues. And I know this is the first time I've covered a VTuber on this channel, but I don't want to paint that group with a broad brush. I know that they're not all like this. The VTuber Miss Lala is one such example, having mentioned online her disgust with ICE destroying communities. Her statement against conservative cruelty enraged Rev, whose community proceeded to gang up on her even though Lala's statement was not directed at Rev. Advanced GG was an energy supplement sponsor that many VTubers had partnered with, including Rev, but following Rev's aggression towards Lala, other VTubers decided to step down from their partnerships. The company eventually realized how bad this made them look and dropped Rev as a sponsor, as well as his VTuber wife, who was not worth mentioning up until this point. Seeing VTubers rally against this harassment in a way that damaged Rev's incentive to continue his bigoted cruelty really opened my eyes to this community. It's easy for the worst people and media to rise to the top of any fandom and then write it off entirely. I'll admit that, given my initial exposure, part of me thought all VTubers were like Rev. But it turns out there were others within this community who weren't willing to put up with his vile nature. I'll do the same with anime as well. I'm sure the influence of people like Rev have painted anime's appeal as a concerning obsession with the juvenile and the prepubescent, but there's more to the medium than that. One of my favorite anime movies that doesn't get talked about enough is Royal Space Force: The Wings of Honiamis. The film takes place on an alternative Earth where mankind has yet to achieve spaceflight. The space program is filled with weary losers, with one of them being Shiro, a guy who couldn't cut it as a Navy pilot. Shiro, however, becomes inspired to be the first man in space after speaking with the religious fundamentalist Rikini. Even after the program had suffered so many failures and losses, Shiro's newfound inspiration keeps the Space Force on track to launch the first space flight that won't explode before reaching orbit. There's a lot of teamwork among a group of older guys who have either burnt out or stopped caring about the world. And then in comes Shiro, ready to lift up his struggling space program. And it succeeds, not just because of him, but the work of so many others working towards the same goal and something bigger than themselves. The Wings of Honiamis is a gorgeous animated film with rich detail, an otherworldly soundtrack, and characters that feel real in such an alternative setting. It also has Bryan Cranston in the English dub if you really need another selling point. But it tends to be forgotten about in anime discussions because it was a commercial failure and doesn't boast the many cliches and trademarks of the medium. There are no cute magical girls, no iconic fight scenes, no exaggerated comedy, and it's not as heavy on the sex and violence compared to much of its contemporaries. It is very much an adult anime movie that doesn't get lost in the many nuts and bolts of its intricate science fiction. Such a movie defies the stereotype that anime is a strictly childish medium, and it only furthered my curiosity to the point where I'm no longer ashamed to buy a Sailor Moon video, which yes, it wasn't my friend, it was me. The joke's over now. Rev says Desu gets defensive of anime and manga being misunderstood and lied about by the mainstream. But when it comes to American cartoons, superhero media, and the Academy Awards, he reveals so much ignorance built on little more than a grotesque social media diet. Rather than recognizing that fascination with Japanese media as a launch point for exploring more about culture, he has instead shoved pop culture into a very cramped box where it can never grow. Why would James Gunn make his Superman movie political? Why are there gay and trans characters in cartoons for kids nowadays? There are legitimate answers to these questions based on how our culture has shifted, but Rev doesn't care about that, and likely his audience doesn't either. People like him want to feel justified in their right-wing perspectives being correct. They want to believe rolling back DEI initiatives was a smart call for businesses like Target, even though it backfired horribly. They want to claim that it's disturbing that kids' cartoons have gay characters, even though this is such a non-issue for anybody who isn't a homophobic asshole. They want all of their flawed political philosophies to seem common and reasonable. But with their politics growing less favorable and more isolating, their minds have melted to such a degree that these controversial and offensive beliefs somehow seem more acceptable and less deranged when coming from an anime character. Perhaps one day they'll see their own reflection in Rev's oversized glasses and realize what they've really become.